In the mist-covered hills of 5th century Britain, a kingdom lay in ruins, fractured by power struggles, betrayal, and an endless war for the throne. The old king had passed, and with him, the last hope for peace. For years, the land had been without a ruler, and its people, left to fend for themselves, suffered in silence. But fate, as it always does, had its own plan. In the heart of this chaos, a boy was born, a boy who knew nothing of his royal blood, who was raised in secret, far from the palace, unaware of the destiny that awaited him. Arthur, no crown, no title, just a humble child. Yet, one fateful day, the kingdom's salvation would come, not from an army, but from the hand of a boy who is destined to pull a sword from a stone and change the fate of an empire. This wasn't just any sword. It was a legendary blade, thrust deep into stone, and it bore a message that would echo through history. Whosoever pulls this sword is the rightful king of England. But who could believe such a tale? Kings and warriors tried, each failing, their strength no match for the stone's mysterious power. And then came Arthur, untested, unknown, the last person anyone expected to fulfill such a prophecy. But when he gripped the hilt, something impossible happened. The sword slid free with ease, and in that moment, Britain's lost hope was restored. But this was only the beginning. The boy who had pulled the sword would soon face the trials of a lifetime, leading him to form a kingdom that would forever be remembered in legend. The world had no place for a boy to become a king. Yet Arthur was about to show them that greatness could arise from the most unlikely of places. The realm would soon tremble before his courage. But not everyone would bow to the new king. There were those who would do anything to see him fail, even if it meant betraying blood and honor. For as much as Arthur was a king by prophecy, he would become a king through sacrifice, war, and his unyielding belief in the values of justice, equality, and unity. This is the untold story of how a boy became a king, how a sword forged by destiny became a symbol of a kingdom, and how the legend of King Arthur would rise from the ashes to give Britain something it had not seen in centuries: a true leader. The moment Arthur pulled Excalibur from the stone, the world could no longer ignore him. It wasn't just a boy who had proven himself worthy of the sword. It was the fate of Britain itself that had been placed in his hands. Despite the skepticism of the nobles, despite the mockery of many, Arthur was now the rightful king of England. But this was only the beginning of his journey. The prophecy had fulfilled itself, but Arthur would have to prove, through action, that he was, indeed, the ruler Britain needed. In the days following the pulling of the sword, Arthur was thrust into a kingdom torn apart by warfare. The nobles who had claimed to be the rightful heirs of the throne were not willing to surrender their power, so King Roderick of Cornwall, one of the strongest claimants, openly defied Arthur, refusing to acknowledge him as the true king. Though Arthur had the sword, he had yet to prove he had the strength to rule. His first battle, which was to be a test of his leadership, would come swiftly. Merlin, the great wizard who had guided Uther Pendragon and orchestrated Arthur's rise, was by his side during this time. Merlin had always known Arthur's destiny, and he was a powerful advisor. But Arthur's courage and wisdom would ultimately have to come from within. It was Merlin who encouraged Arthur to trust his instincts and to lead with justice, not just strength. The battle with King Roderick's forces was fierce, but Arthur's leadership proved invaluable. He fought with bravery, but more importantly, he inspired his men with his conviction. The young king was no longer just a boy who had pulled a sword from a stone. He was the leader of a united army. Arthur's victory in Cornwall was not just about defeating an enemy, it was the first real test of his kingship, and he passed it with flying colors. The next few years of Arthur's reign were marked by further victories. He began to consolidate his power, taking control of lands that had previously been fragmented and ungoverned. He built alliances with neighboring kingdoms, uniting them through mutual respect and shared values, rather than through force or coercion. In doing so, Arthur began to change the very nature of kingship itself. No longer was the king simply a figurehead on a throne. He was a leader, a protector, and a symbol of hope. But perhaps Arthur's most important achievement during these early years was the creation of Camelot, the legendary city that would become the heart of his kingdom. Camelot wasn't just a castle. It was a representation of Arthur's ideals. It was a place where justice, honor, and equality reigned. It was a city that sought to unify the fractured pieces of Britain, where all men noble and common were treated with dignity. But Camelot was more than just a physical city. It was a symbol of Arthur's reign. His vision for Britain was not one of division or feudalism, where power was concentrated in the hands of the few. It was a kingdom where fairness and justice were the bedrock of society. Camelot became the center of this ideal, a place where knights could gather not only for battles, but for the pursuit of justice and virtue. As Arthur's reputation grew, so did the number of knights who sought to join his cause. The idea of a round table came to Arthur as a way to embody the values of equality and justice that were at the core of his rule. The round table was revolutionary in its design, a traditional court where the king sat above all others, but a circle where no man was higher than the other. The knights who gathered around the table were sworn to protect the kingdom, but they were also expected to uphold the highest ideals of honor, bravery, and loyalty. The formation of the Round Table also marked the beginning of the knighthood quests, some of which would become legendary. Among these knights were figures like Lancelot, Gawain, Percival, and Tristan, each of whom would play a significant role in both the successes and challenges that lay ahead for Arthur's kingdom. One of the most famous quests that came from the Round Table was the search for the Holy Grail, the legendary cup said to possess divine power. The quest for the Grail brought together Arthur's knights in a mission that transcended mere mortal conflict. It was a test of spiritual strength, of purity of heart, and of the knights' commitment to the highest ideals of Arthur's reign. But the formation of the Round Table also had its challenges. Not all of the knights who joined Arthur's cause were noble in heart, and not all of them could live up to the high standards set by the king. It was at Camelot that Arthur learned that ruling was not just about enforcing justice on others, it was also about managing the human flaws of those closest to him. The most painful betrayal of Arthur's reign would come from within his own circle. Lancelot, one of his most trusted knights and closest friends, fell into a forbidden love affair with Guinevere, Arthur's queen. This relationship, though based in passion and true affection, ultimately tore at the very foundation of Arthur's kingdom. Guinevere's infidelity shattered the unity of the Round Table, leading to mistrust and division among the knights. At the same time, Mordred, Arthur's son by his half-sister Morgan, began to grow disillusioned with his father. Mordred's birth had been shrouded in secrecy and scandal. Though Arthur was unaware of it at the time, Mordred was a child born of betrayal. His mother had used Arthur's own blood to birth the child who would one day become his greatest enemy. Though Camelot and the Round Table were symbols of Arthur's idealistic vision, the kingdom was not immune to conflict. Rival kingdoms and warring factions sought to challenge Arthur's rule, and his reign would be defined by many brutal battles. One of the most famous of these was the Battle of Badon Hill, where Arthur led his forces to victory against the Saxons, one of Britain's greatest threats. It was here that Arthur's tactical genius and leadership were put to the ultimate test. His forces, though outnumbered, triumphed due to Arthur's strategic brilliance and the loyalty of his knights. But Arthur's battles weren't always won through strength alone. As his kingdom grew, so did the political intrigue that surrounded him. Rivals from within and without constantly plotted against him, seeking to tear down what Arthur had built. But Arthur's strength wasn't just in his ability to win battles, it was in his unwavering belief in the ideals he held dear. Despite all the victories, however, the cracks within Camelot were beginning to show. Mordred, Arthur's son, and the dark shadow of his lineage, was no longer content to remain in the background. Driven by jealousy, resentment, and his desire for power, Mordred began to stir unrest among the knights of the Round Table. He had already seen the fractures in Arthur's court, and now he would exploit them. The final days of Arthur's reign came with the ultimate betrayal, Mordred's rebellion. It was an act that would not only break Arthur's heart, but also shatter everything he had worked for. In a climactic battle, Arthur faced his son, the very child he had unknowingly fathered with his sister. It was here that Arthur would be forced to face the consequences of his idealistic vision of unity, where even those he loved and trusted most could turn against him. The Battle of Camelot marked the tragic end of the kingdom of Camelot. Arthur, though victorious, was mortally wounded in the battle. His final moments were spent on the battlefield, facing the son he had failed to understand. With his dying breath, Arthur commanded that Excalibur, the sword of destiny, be returned to the Lady of the Lake. His death was the end of an era, but his legend would never die. The kingdom of Camelot fell, but the story of Arthur would live on, echoing through time as a symbol of hope, honor, and the belief that one man, no matter his origins, could change the world. As Arthur lay dying, he entrusted his most loyal knight, Sir Bedivere, to return Excalibur to the lake. Bedivere cast the sword into the waters, and as the blade disappeared beneath the surface, so too did the heir of King Arthur. But his final words, "I shall return when Britain needs me most," would keep his legend alive for generations. The legacy of King Arthur is one of both triumph and tragedy. His reign brought unity to a divided land, a land that had once been lost in chaos. But like all great heroes, Arthur's story was defined by both his victories and his flaws. He was a king who sought to build a better world, but in doing so, he learned that even the most noble of dreams can be shattered by betrayal. As the legend of King Arthur fades into the mist of time, his story remains etched in the hearts of all who believe in the power of a single individual to shape the world. Arthur's reign wasn't just about battles and conquest, it was about ideals, about creating a kingdom founded on justice, honor, and equality. Though Camelot may have fallen and the Round Table may have crumbled, the legacy of Arthur endures in the dreams of every person who longs for a world where fairness and unity prevail. Arthur was not a perfect king. His story, filled with glory and heartbreak, reminds us that even the greatest of heroes are not immune to the flaws of the human heart. Betrayal, tragedy, and loss were all part of his journey, but it was in his resilience, his unwavering belief in his vision, that Arthur's true greatness shone. His rise from a humble boy to a king who united a fractured land is a testament to the power of destiny, courage, and the unyielding spirit of leadership. But the legend of Arthur doesn't end with his death. His final words, "I shall return when Britain needs me most," have echoed through the ages, reminding us that legends never truly die. They only sleep, waiting for the moment when they are needed again. Perhaps that moment has not yet come, but the hope that Arthur will one day return to guide us through our darkest times remains a beacon of light, just as it has for centuries. In a world where we often find ourselves divided, lost in our own struggles, we look to the legend of King Arthur to remind us that there is always hope, that a leader driven by justice and honor can bring people together. The story of Arthur and his knights is not just the tale of a long-lost kingdom, it is a reminder that one person can make a difference, that heroes are born in the most unlikely of places, and that the dream of Camelot can live on in our hearts. As the legend continues to inspire generations, we find ourselves asking, what would Arthur do in today's world? What would he say to us, the heirs to his vision of a better world? Perhaps the answer lies in our willingness to believe that the greatest hero is not one who never falls, but one who rises again after every defeat. If you believe in the power of legends, if you believe that heroes can still change the world, then join us on this journey. Subscribe, like, and share, because the story of King Arthur is far from over. His legend lives on. And just like Camelot, we can build a future where justice, equality, and honor reign once more. Thank you for joining us in this timeless tale. Until the next legendary hero arrives, remember, the legend lives within us all.